Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 5 of the Natural Female Muscle podcast. Today, we are joined by coach and athlete Emma Currivan. In this past year, Emma has made some amazing steps forward in the world of bodybuilding as she competed for the first time last year in 2022. This season took some incredible results for Emma within the figure division specifically, including the figure title and the overall at both the WNBF Island and the NBFI, the total figure title at the PCA Island, second at the UK DFBA British, European figure title and PNBA Pro card at the INBA European, and then top 3 at WNBF World. So an absolutely amazing first season. But I think that one thing that's very important to note when we look at this, and we'll definitely dive into this in the episode, is the success that Emma achieved within that first season was an accumulation of, years of work leading up to that, which will be a really important thing for us to discuss within this episode. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. But it's also been an amazing year for Emma within a career perspective as well, as she's really, really thrived in becoming an amazing online coach and something that she's super passionate about as well. So lots to kind of dive into and discuss. But first and foremost, Emma, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for such a kind introduction. It's funny, when you asked me the other day to send like how the season had gone, I was writing out thinking, did that really happen? Because I felt like I was living my entire life waiting for 2022, and now it's just done. And it's so funny how quickly you just move on. Like, it's crazy how quickly you just forget about it almost. And it's like, okay, what's next? Which I suppose is just inherent in bodybuilding. Like, you're always just thinking, what's next now?
Yeah, it must be so weird that, because like with yourself with that season, I know you approached AJ and it was kind of like, this is the goal for this year. Like, let's spend a few years growing. And at the start, it maybe feels like, one, it's kind of like a little bit of a way away. And then you're almost working to it for so long that it kind of almost feels like it's never going to happen. But then it does happen. And then you're like, oh my God, I just did that. And that's almost like how I feel when I'm thinking about taking my break, and why it was so amazing for me to watch the process that you went through with AJ and see like, wow, you really committed to that phase. And this is what happens as a result of it.
Yeah, and it's something whenever people approach me now about competing, like I had people approaching me earlier in the year about competing this year, and I'm saying, no, like, and I get both sides. Like, yes, just do a show and try it, but at the same time, if you're young and you don't have the muscle tissue, you haven't spent the time, like, you are going to do yourself so many favors by waiting. And I suppose it's probably something we can get into, but it's kind of, do you like the idea of competing, or do you actually love bodybuilding? Because I just loved bodybuilding. Like, I just was living like a bodybuilder for years, and I thought, well, if I'm gonna track my food and do all this stuff and live like a hermit, well, like, I may as well do something at the end of it then.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you kind of naturally fall into it. And then it's also, you want to have a good experience with it too, because like you say, yes, you can just get on stage and have the experience, but if you really don't have much tissue there or haven't been training for very long, that's not going to be fun at all. And you're probably not going to be very happy out the back end of it either. So
yeah, like I definitely think, looking back on paper, and actually even how it felt, like, my prep felt not easy is definitely not the word, but it wasn't that hard or like difficult. I wasn't doing like daily cardio, or I mean, my food got a bit low towards the end, but I think to other people, if they saw what I was doing, they would probably think, how could you get away with that? But it's because I had spent 2 years like growing for that reason, and like years before that training. Like, I mean, I don't know, it's a hard one when you're like a natural female, because sometimes you're thinking, yeah, I'm pretty big, and then other times you're like, I am so small, there's nothing on me. But I do think I have some muscle, so that probably helped with not having to like run myself into the ground. And again, that's what time does. It gives you that chance to actually not have to kill yourself in a prep, hopefully. I mean, some people will have to regardless, but I was lucky.
I think it's just, you just didn't have to make so many different changes all at once, because the reality is you were already doing everything you need to do. And this is one of the best things about spending time. Like, yes, you get the benefits of building up food, etc., but it's also that it's not just such a lifestyle shock too. So you're basically just bringing food down, having to increase expenditure, still training hard, still doing all the same things, but you're not feeling like your whole life is like changing massively this goal, which is usually the biggest thing, because then that's when people really end up being super stressed or really struggling with everything. And like that really shows with you in the fact that you just loved what you were doing the same thing that you'd always been doing anyway. Now you were just working towards a different goal and maybe feeling a little bit tired and hungry at points.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this. I'm just back from a walk, and obviously my mind just wanders when I'm on walks. And I was kind of thinking, you know, I follow a lot of people who are starting prep now, and I've got my own clients starting maybe photo shoot preps and things like that. And I was sort of thinking, you really have to not make a big song and dance about it. I think the people who they start prep and suddenly, like, don't get me, like, I'm trying to phrase this properly. Obviously, you want to be posting about it, and it's exciting. It is exciting. But the people who it's like everything's suddenly being posted on their stories, like they're putting all this pressure on themselves, like, oh my God, I'm on prep, I'm on prep. But like, really, your life shouldn't have changed at all from the day before you start prep to the day you started prep. Like mine didn't. My day to day, I mean, the only change was when I started prep, I was still working full time, but that was for like, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks. So I got lucky. Obviously, the first 3 or 4 weeks, pretty simple because you're just eating a bit less, motivation's high, but nothing changed, you know. And I think the more seasoned bodybuilders are like that, you know, so like some of them you don't even know they're on prep, and then suddenly they post and they're like they're like 4 weeks out and shredded, and you're thinking, when did you go on prep? Whereas yeah, I think, and it is a hard one because I know if it is your first time, like yeah, like I said, it's exciting and I get it, but I think if you can just kind of just chill out about it and just kind of not put this massive pressure on yourself to be, everything has to be suddenly really different. Like you should already be doing all the things that you were going to do in prep anyway. Like my cardio, I don't think it even changed from off season to prep. I was just doing rest day cardio, just ate a little bit less, and that was it, you know. And I think that's what kind of made it feel again like simple. And then actually that's what made post show simple, because yeah, my day-to-day didn't change. It was the exact same as it was when I was in my off season beforehand. So, and again, I think it just comes down to maybe maturity. I know it was my first season, but I'm always like, not that I'm like wasn't a first timer, because of course I was still my first time, but I don't think I was like, no, not that I wasn't like most first timers, but I felt like I'd just been doing it so long that I almost didn't feel like a first timer, if that makes sense. You know, it was just, or maybe it's because I'm old as well. Like I'm 26, so it's not like I'm a kind of a 20-year-old first timer. I do think there is a difference, of course, you know, this like longer time.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And we'll definitely come back around to kind of going through the prep, and also kind of like you sort of hinted today, like the off season and definitely the pre-prep as well, and how that affected you going into it too. But we'll start by kind of like pulling it back a little bit, because we've already hinted to the fact that you were already in such a good spot and an experienced spot as well. The age, but also the experience within it. So it's not just your physical age, but it's also your age within bodybuilding too, before you prepped, was in a really, really good place. So do you want to kind of just like start at the beginning with actually what got you into training in the first place? Because sometimes the correlation between like training and bodybuilding is slightly different and they transfer in a little bit. So like how that started, and then that kind of how that transitioned into the bodybuilding too.
Yeah, of course. So I was always quite sporty growing up. Like I did everything. I did like Gaelic football, like basketball, Olympic handball, did all these sports in school. My main thing was horse riding though. Like I was big into horses. Like, yeah, I was on a pony before I could walk really. And I did that up until I was about 18. So the rest of the sports I did, they kind of dropped off, but that was the one that I kind of kept up. And to be honest, I kind of stopped doing it just because it was getting very high pressure for me. Like I was competing at a really high level, and it was supposed to be a hobby, and it was putting a lot of stress on me. And also I was around 18, so I'd kind of discovered alcohol at that point, and getting up at 6 a.m. to go and compete up and down the country every weekend, it doesn't really align with being an 18-year-old who wants to go out and have fun. So that was partly to do with it, but it was more so just the pressure. But around that time as well, I'd gotten into the gym and training when I was like 16. So I was, even though I was quite sporty, I was also not like massively overweight, but I struggled with my weight like my whole life. You know, I was part of the generation who, you know, we were exposed to Kate Moss, you have to be skinny. Every magazine was about, you know, how to blast belly fat. Like that was the narrative that I had been fed. And so I just always had struggled and been very aware and conscious of my weight. And I feel like from the time I was about 13, I was trying to diet and then not dieting, and you know it was looking back like quite sad. Like I wish I could go back and like give that version of me a hug, because she just had no idea. But I fell into the gym, and this was like when fitness was just starting to take off. So like, the real OG fitness influencers like Nikki Blackketter, Whitney Simmons. I
Yeah.
realized the other day, this is an aside, but how old I am. I was watching Christian Guzman's video, and he mentioned how it was Heidi's birthday. And he was like, how many birthdays is this that we're together? And she said, oh, it's like 7. And I was like, hang on, I remember when you were with Nikki Blackketter,
Yeah.
and now you've been 7 birthdays. I was like, hang on, I've been watching you for like 10 years. Like that. Oh my God, I felt so old. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, like they were the kind of the fitness influencers who were around then. So there was some of the, kind of crappy like 30-day squat challenge, skinny teas, all that sort of stuff on Instagram, and like all the terrible like workouts and things. But there was a few kind of influencers and YouTubers kind of coming up, like Jeff Nippert as well. He's one person that I followed, which he actually trains in Pure Muscle and Fitness. So it's really cool. Whenever I see him in person, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Jeff.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. He's so small. He is so small, like short. I know it feels so bad saying that, but he is. But yeah, anyway, I'm such a bad for rambling.
It's
But
okay.
yeah, I started getting into the gym, and my kind of main thing was, again, like weight loss, fat loss. So I did lose like a lot of weight around the age of 17, but it was really badly done, as in I was eating like 1,000 calories, tracking everything on my MyFitnessPal, probably really badly, like incorrectly, doing loads and loads of cardio. Like I was doing some strength training, and I remember a PE teacher saw me doing something, I can't remember what, and she was like, oh, you're really, really strong. And I think that was the first time anyone had kind of said that to me. And obviously coming from a background of like horse riding, and it's funny, I know so many girls who did horse riding who are now bodybuilders, because there's a lot of like carryover, I think, even just from the like dedicating your life to a sport. But I was strong, I was always like lifting up like bales, and trying to control a whatever 1,000-pound animal. You have to be quite strong. So then I started getting more into kind of like lifting and training a little bit heavier. I started going to like a gym. I was going to my school gym at the time, which had like 3 machines, so I started going to a real gym. I got a program. I suppose it just kind of went from there, and I was sort of like in and out of training for a while. I obviously lost like a lot of weight. I gained some of it back when I went to uni, just because, again, first year university, all I was doing was drinking and partying, to be honest, kind of going to the gym, but not really. And yeah, then when I was actually 19, my dad passed away, and that for me was like a big turning point. I think because it was such a shock, and I just went to the gym like the next day, and that became like my safe place. And then from there, I just started getting more and more into it. And then the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn, and I started like dieting, and then doing like kind of muscle building phases. I did have quite a bad or poor relationship with food. Like I would kind of slip into binge tendencies a lot when I was dieting, which thankfully, like now at this point, like I don't really have problems with that anymore, which is obviously nice considering I'm competing. But yeah, and then it's just over the years, I just, again, I got lucky. I started following people like I said, Jeff Nippert, 3DMJ, the kind of evidence-based people. And then yeah, just along the way, I kind of discovered things like natural bodybuilding. I found like AJ and stuff like that, and it's just kind of continued on from there. But yeah, that's kind of like how I got into the gym. I think I've always been an obsessive person. I tend to get really obsessed with things, and I just got lucky that the thing that I happened to get obsessed with around that time was the gym, and it just stuck, and I just have not looked back.
No, that's awesome. It's really cool to see how that transitioned quite a lot for you, from like how it started with the way that the fitness industry was back then, which, by the way, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and saying how crazy it is how this has changed, because I was kind of in that era as well, where the first people I followed were Nikki Blackketter and Whitney Simmons. And it was so different, because everything was like hit circuits, glute kickbacks on the Stairmaster. I know people joke about it now, but like now, what do you
I
see?
thought that was true.
Like, what do we see now when we go on reels? Like, it's all like muscle mommy, like train hard, be strong. Like, and I know people think it's silly, but like, I can't imagine the difference that it would have made if I'd have seen stuff like this compared to now. And I think it's great, because I think that it's going to really change the way that the next generation is. And because it really was so different, and so many of us took so long to get from doing that to feeling okay to be strong and to do all of this stuff in the gym, because there just wasn't like anyone on Instagram like doing that, unless you were following powerlifters, unless you were following like a few very select people. There just wasn't anything at the time.
Yeah, I recently, just for laughs, I went back and watched some of Whitney Simmons' old videos. And no shade to Whitney Simmons, like she's an amazing businesswoman and everything. But oh my God, some of the like shoulder work she was posting, it was just like 10 variations of a dumbbell shoulder press.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm thinking, what is this? Yes, all the crazy stuff. And it's just so funny looking back. It's like exercise selection not even once. Like it is funny, but yeah, you're right. I see so many like younger athletes now getting into it, and like they're just so much further ahead than I was at that age, because they're exposed to good information, which is amazing. You know, I have a client just started with me, and I think she's like 19 or 20, and she's got so much muscle, and she was like, oh yeah, I feel like really small and stuff. And I'm saying like if you could see what I look like at your age, you would not be saying that. I'm like, give yourself some credit. Like you're so far like ahead of where you would be if you had been in this position like 10 years ago. So yeah, it is amazing. And like obviously it kind of comes down to like people like us trying to put out that content to like, and like sometimes I feel like I'm saying the same things all the time on Instagram, but you have to say like, you need to train hard, you need to not be afraid to gain weight, you need to eat more. And I will keep saying that for the rest of my life, because I'll have people come to me who are scared to eat more. They're scared to gain weight, and they believe some of those myths still, you know, like they do. And I always like, there's so many things that I just take for granted. And someone will ask me a question then, and I'm thinking, oh, I didn't think people still thought that. And you're trying to like navigate it without coming across like really condescending. But yeah, you're kind of like, oh God, and it does just show like there is still a way to go, but it's definitely progressed so much compared to like when we were kind of coming into it, which
big time. And it is so good that like you said, you repeat that stuff, because just like you, I always think the same. I'm like, do I really need to mention like some of these things? And then somebody will have a consult with me, and I'm just like, oh my God, I need to keep saying these things, because people do still need to keep hearing them, which is why it's good we talk about them. But yeah, it is amazing to see how that's kind of transformed. But even through that, you know, like you took that natural progression, which even still like with the stuff there is now, people have to take the natural progression to feel comfortable in the gym and to make that progress. And especially when it comes to moving into bodybuilding, I think everyone has their own experience with finding what kind of takes them there in terms of what brings them to the gym. And I'm obviously so sorry to hear about like your loss at that time, but it is wonderful that you did have something that kind of enabled you to bring that into yourself and be able to focus on you, and you turn that into something that's been absolutely incredible in your own passion with both what you do and with work as well. And I think that often people will have something that kind of drives them into the gym, and then they find strengths within themselves, which is absolutely amazing. And then you started to learn more from like an educational side of things, found more about bodybuilding, which is really cool that you found out a lot about the natural side too, and just kind of stuck with that for so long, because a lot of people definitely don't in those initial years sometimes. So it's cool that you definitely had that education, especially with people like 3DMJ who are awesome with putting that stuff out there, and were definitely really, really big at that time as well. Obviously, they're still massive, that have such a huge influence. And that, of course, in itself has just added up over time, because like you said, you're 26 now. So you started training when you were like 17. It's like 10 years of training, which like people don't put into perspective when they see a lot of these things, especially when it comes to first timers. And it's definitely something that's even cool for myself to see, because I remember when like even I did my first show, and I'd be like, why do all these people look like this? And I'm like, I'm 19 years old. Like that is what's going on right now. And it's good to put that example out there, because when you do have competitive goals and when you do want to do it well, it's like you can take your time and you can do what you need to do, but you just need to have that understanding of what it takes. So obviously you reached out to AJ, was it 2019 or 2018?
2020. So it's almost 3 years now. 3 years. Yeah. So it was during the pandemic, like during lockdown. I was just so lost. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. So I just need somebody to tell me what to do. And yeah, I followed him for a while, and I thought, yeah, I honestly, and I've always said this on podcasts, I really thought he was going to tell me like best of luck, but no, like that's what I was expecting. And instead he was like, you could be a British champion. And I was like, what? Like it was mad. Like I still remember getting that video, like that initial video back from him and thinking, this guy is on crack. Like, what is he saying? Like, none of this makes sense. But yeah, it was like just from that moment on, like bodybuilding was always something I thought I'd like to do, but I just had this in my head that like I can't do it. You know, I would look at girls competing and think I could never get that lean. I'd never be able to stick to a diet for that long. I wouldn't be able to look like that. And just having him tell me like you have potential, like that was enough to like from that day. I swear my life changed that day. I was just like, I'm a bodybuilder now. Like he gave me permission to like think of myself as a bodybuilder. It took me until I actually competed to be like, now I can say I'm a bodybuilder. I think for ages I was still like, oh no, I can't say it until I step on stage, because what if I don't get there? Even though like you do not have to compete to be a bodybuilder, like at all. But I can say that to other people, but I never thought about myself. But yeah, like from that day on, I was just like all in, like this is my lifestyle now, and I love it. Thank God.
No, it's awesome. You can see that had such a like a turning point within what you did. And obviously, yes, like that's actually a huge thing that you've mentioned that a lot of people don't often say when they start with the coach, is that one, obviously they give you the tools to be the best athlete, but they also help you validate yourself as an athlete as well sometimes, which makes a huge difference in bodybuilding. Like if you start to believe in yourself and you start to be like, okay, like I can actually do this, because a lot of people think just like that, in the sense that bodybuilding would be cool, but I'll never do it. Like it's just not going to happen to me. And it's like, but why? Like why is it not going to happen to you? And having that external person who can look at you and actually has put people on stage or knows what it takes to go through a prep or whatever it is, like that makes a huge difference in your mindset and your entire journey.
Yeah, completely. Like it does, like just having somebody, because something I've always just struggled with is like self-belief, like in everything. And it's I think it's something that became even more apparent to me in prep. Like I always knew I was a bit self-deprecating, but even in prep I was like, no, I'm not good enough. Even after winning everything, or like not everything, but all those shows, I was like, meh, was that a fluke? Like that's sort of just how my brain works. And even in business and everything, like I do doubt myself a lot. So having somebody there to actually just be like, no, stop doubting yourself, like it really helps, like so much. And even as a coach myself, I know that I'm that for so many people, is like that sense of reassurance, you know, that like you're on the right track, you're doing what you need to do, you don't need to worry, like you just need to do what I'm asking you to do, and you're going to get to where you want to be. Like I'm not lying to you, you know, I know that that's the case. I think when it's you and you're looking at yourself, like your vision can get blurry, you know, like I don't know how anybody coaches themselves. I don't know how AJ does it, or anybody. Like if I had to coach myself, I'd be a stick by the end of prep, because I would have just like eaten nothing, you know. So yeah, that's just something that amazes me.
Yeah, I could not do it. I mean, when he obviously does an incredible job, an absolutely incredible job, but I have to be his second eyes, because
Yeah.
otherwise he'd run himself even more into the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah, it helps so much to obviously have that external opinion from someone. And again, like I mentioned, to even just guide you. And what we mentioned at the start is to maximize your progress going into that first prep as well. So you guys kind of headed into just prominently focusing on growing from there. I know you ran a few like diets in and out of it. What was that actually like for you at that point, especially because you'd been in a position where the start of your fitness journey was kind of quite weight loss related too. So as much as we kind of are in a spot now where we're always like, yes, eat to grow, and, you know, we've got to get uncomfortable at points. The first time you really do it, sometimes it is actually a little bit daunting. But what was that actually like for you? Because it might have been totally fine, but how did you find that when you approached AJ and when you were like starting to build food up, starting to push things harder in the gym? Did you have any moments where that was a little bit difficult?
Yeah, so I had done a few like gaining phases myself, and I think I'd say taking my food up to maybe like 2,500 calories, you know, like not low, you know, like I was never afraid to eat. I love food, so no problem for me to eat more. But then yeah, we started off, and I think I do remember distinctly he had up my food and I was like, oh, this is the highest I've ever eaten. I remember saying it to him. I was like, I've never been on this much food before, but I was actually really enjoying the process. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely times where I maybe felt a bit uncomfortable. Like I think we were in a gainer phase for like a few months and then we actually did a diet. And then we went back into like my longest sort of surplus phase. And that second one, that was when I got the most uncomfortable. So I think I got up to like 168 pounds. And for reference, I think on stage I was 123 at the end, and I'm currently like 155, 156. And this will probably be like closest to my kind of normal. So that was hard. And it was made even harder by the fact that I was actually living in Spain at the time. It was summer. So yeah, it was hard because I didn't feel really comfortable in swimsuits, even just going on a walk, going on a walk when it's 30 degrees outside and you're carrying that much extra weight. Oh my God, it's really, really challenging because you're just out of breath and you just like, like your legs are chafing. You just don't feel good. So that was hard, but equally, I knew that I had to do it. Like I knew that like, if I want more muscle than I've ever had before, I'm going to have to accept this. And I was still enjoying training so much. Like I still was in a position where I was getting stronger and stronger. So I was kind of happy to deal with it. Now, when he did say to me, okay, we're going to diet, I was like, thank God we're going to diet. Because I think at that point, even just like my appetite was in the floor. Like I'd be kind of trying to eat food, like looking at the bowl of food thinking, okay, that needs to be inside of me. And I don't know how that's going to happen because I was just so stuffed. And, when you're kind of at the position where like your insulin sensitivity is just completely shot, like you can literally feel after you've eaten a meal that those carbs are just not really going into your cells. Like they're just, it's not really fun feeling. Like I always tell people, I'm like, if you haven't felt like that, you have not pushed, to the best of your abilities, like you should be like really excited to diet by the time you come to the end of your gaining phases. So yeah, that one was definitely the hardest, but equally I knew, and even AJ said to me at the time, like the next time we go into a surplus, like before prep, you won't be getting this heavy, like that, I won't let that happen because that's going to make prep really, really difficult. So I think actually knowing exactly what the next few stages were going to look like that helps a lot. Like having somebody break down, this is what we're doing now, this is the diet, this is the pre-prep diet, we're going to go back, we're going to build your food up, but you're not going to get this heavy again. That really helps. And that kind of kept me going when I was at that sort of like peak body weight, because I wasn't comfortable, but again, that's what's required, especially as a female, and especially as a female who's not assisted. Like you're probably going to be quite uncomfortable, and some people will, like, I suppose, hold it differently. I think just for me, like I sit a little bit on the kind of softer side, shall we say, like not like, don't get me wrong, I know the normal person would look at me and say like she's in good shape, but compared to shredded, it is a little bit like heavier. And I know some people in their off seasons, they look a lot leaner. I just don't. And there's no point in me getting annoyed about that. There's no point in me getting upset. I can't change it. It's my physiology. It's just the way that I am. And I know that like ultimately it's where I perform best. It's where I'm going to grow the best and feel the best most of the time. But yeah, it is like challenging, like mentally challenging. I think when you've gone through it so many times though, you know what to expect, but it can still be hard. Like even now, like post show, I'm still like, there's still times where I'm like, oh my God, I'm not used to this. But I think it's a time thing as well, and just again maturity within like the process.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely gets like kind of easier a little bit the more that you do it, because not that it feels better, because it still feels the same. Like you still feel uncomfortable, but you have better acceptance of it. I think that's like the biggest difference. And so many people are always like kind of asking that question of, how can I feel better in like off seasons, or how can I feel better when I'm gaining, and like, how can I deal with this because I just can't push through? And the reality is, just like you said, you have to have an understanding that it's an important phase for you to go to for the long-term goal. And if you are a female who does not hold their body fat favorably, like 95% of us, like there's very few individuals who are genetically gifted who will hold their body fat super favorably in the off season. And like amazing for them, amazing for everyone who pushes in an off season. But like if you're feeling uncomfortable, but you need to do that for the goal, you have to just tell yourself that I have to do this for the goal, and appreciate it, because your coach can't fix that for you. you can't do anything to change it. All you need to do is just focus on what you can do in that situation. And I think that, like you even said there, having a little bit of a focus on like the phases ahead makes a huge difference, because you don't just kind of feel like, why am I doing this? You understand like, this is for me to train and to improve and to get better. And I'll be dieting here, and this is when I'll be prepping, and this is what the purpose of the phase is. I think sometimes it gets a little bit lost when people either really aren't enjoying like training because they're not getting the benefit of it, or they're also not enjoying bodybuilding. So as a result, the idea of like, they're doing it to progress, it's like, yeah, but why? Because I don't really care about that goal that much. If that makes sense.
I think if you want to be comfortable, bodybuilding is not the sport for you. It's a sport of extremes. It's extreme on both ends, and the people who do well are willing to enjoy the extreme at both ends. You know, you can bodybuild and, you know, have a leaner off season, but you're just going to have to accept the trade-off that you're probably not going to look that much better the next time you prep. And, you know, if you can't accept the discomfort of an off season, then the discomfort of the like arse end of a prep is probably not going to be that nice either, because it's, you know, I think they both have their challenges. I know sometimes people ask me like, which do you prefer, or which is harder? They're both hard. They're both hard in their own way, but I actually love the challenge of both. Like, as much as it's not fun to be uncomfortable and heavy and, you know, feeling like you're just so full of food all the time, I kind of like it as well, because I know that that's what's edging me closer towards the goal. And then same thing when you're dying on a prep and you're going hypo on your walk in the evening, it's like, this is horrible, but I also know I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be shredded. So, you know, I think you have to have that kind of like ability to reframe it. But yeah, no, it is like, it is tough. And I think that's why I love coaching girls through their gaining phases, because no matter what they say, I felt it, you know, like they will say anything. And I know exactly what they're talking about, and I know exactly what it feels like. But I know when you do then diet, like, you get that reward of seeing how much you've changed. And obviously that's the frustrating thing, I suppose, about building muscle. Like, you don't see it, especially if you're natural, you don't see it until you diet. But then when you diet, you're like, whoa, yeah, I'm wow now. Once you get past the like flat stage, which nobody enjoys.
No, you've just got to be so patient with it. And I think it's why, like, as much as we're physique athletes as bodybuilders, to an extent, when you're competitively bodybuilding, it's like you have to definitely rephrase that in the off season to view things a little bit more for performance based, because we're not really going to see many physique changes in the off season. Like, really are not, because like you're saying, like in an off season, say you're gaining like 5 pounds of muscle, say, like that will make a massive difference on your physique when you're lean. But when you're holding like 40 pounds more body fat, you're probably not going to see it, and it sucks a little bit.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's even better, because I think like how much more of a shock is that when you come down, because it's so different versus like, obviously it's great when you're also assisted as well and you look wicked all the time, but it is such a contrast. So it's like you do get to shock yourself even more, and then you can kind of give yourself even more of a pat on the back and be like, I did that. And that's pretty cool. And I definitely saw a lot of that with you, even, you know, as you started to come down, even for your pre-prep, I think it started to show signs of like what was really there. And did that actually kind of, I know you say you struggle a little bit with like being self-deprecating or like a bit of self-doubt, but was that something that did kind of help you a little bit with the confidence aspect of seeing what was going on, but then also having a bit of confidence within the prep too?
Yeah, 100%. Like, within that pre-prep diet, like I got quite lean. I want to say I got down to like around 140 pounds. So, you know, about like 12-ish pounds over stage weight. And I could see like my physique is the type that my shape is so hidden when I'm carrying body fat, because I do carry more of it around my midsection, especially now. It's one thing I've noticed post prep is like I used to carry it quite evenly until I got to like very heavy body weights, and then it was more so around my midsection, whereas post prep it was like, oh, any body fat, it's all going on your stomach, which was just gorgeous, really. But yeah, I think when I get lean, my waist is actually really small, and like it makes, of course, once your waist is small, your upper body looks so much bigger, your legs look so much bigger, your glutes look so much bigger. So yeah, I think once I got to the end of that kind of pre-prep diet, I was like, okay, I actually there's something here, you know. I have some sort of shape, especially things like the side shots, you know, because obviously I did the PCA and the sort of standard figure posing, and
Yeah.
like all those side shots, when you're not lean, they are not forgiving. Like they're really not. And like I'd be taking my check-in pictures when I was kind of peak off season thinking, oh good God, what is this? This is not the thing. This is not how I want to look. But then once you get lean and you like, you know, you have that tiny midsection and everything just starts to pop so much more. It is nice to kind of look at it and see like, okay, this is what we're working with. And then yeah, once I kind of started back into like my actual prep, I knew that once I got down, like it was all going to start kind of coming together. But yeah, I think even what you said there, like when I look at my pictures from the end of prep, it's crazy to me that that was hiding underneath like the kind of star pictures. Like it is pretty damn cool. That's what I tell myself on the days I'm struggling. I'm like, that physique is under there. She is under there. It's just she's just hidden a little bit.
I was going to say, is that helping you quite a lot now that you've gone back into off season, that you can kind of look back on that and see? Because I know I do it, and I know it sounds really weird, but I look back at like my lean pictures and I'm like, okay, I have a waist and I do have shape here. It's there. And I kind of I do like psychologically remind myself, not from a comparison standpoint in the sense that I'm looking back like, oh, I look like that. It's just a positive thing. Do you find that that really helps you a lot as well?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think sometimes when I look back at like prep pictures, I get a bit like, oh, I don't look like that anymore. But more often than not, it's kind of like, okay, I know I can get there, you know, I know that I can get into that sort of condition, especially like naturally. Like I know that I can have lines in my bum and all that sort of stuff, like stuff that, you know, I know some assisted athletes like they don't even get there. So I'm kind of like, okay, I know that I know I can get lean. And I think when you know you can get really lean, it makes it a lot easier to be not so lean. And anytime I am struggling, I just think about how awful it felt at times, you know, when you can't sit down on anything without pillow, or you know, you're trying to like do a deadlift and you can literally feel your hip bones like protruding against the skin, and you're thinking, am I going to snap or will I be able to get this? You know, especially the training perspective. I think that for me is like the worst thing about prep was just how bad training felt towards the end. So anytime I am struggling, I remind myself of that. I'm like, you have energy now, you can train hard, you know, it feels a hell of a lot better. And like nobody really cares what you look like. I think that's something I always try to remind myself. Like I think when you are on social media, you know, you can get in your own head thinking people are going to see me and wonder, oh, she's gained so much weight. But like I've never once looked at somebody and thought that, like ever. And I follow loads of bodybuilders. So I know nobody thinks that about me. So I think you just kind of have to remind yourself of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Like I've started doing that where I start to think about myself as if I was somebody else, which is strange. But sometimes when I'm like, oh, should I wear this or that? I think about, well, if I saw somebody else wearing that, I think they'd look fucking awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm going to wear that, you know, just like those things do really help, because for some reason we do always have such a self like critical view on like, we never ever take that approach with other people. So why do we do it with ourselves? So I think that just every now and then changing that and viewing you as like somebody else, but then actually being like, no, I am me, is like really important. And it's nice to see that you've definitely felt like that a lot in definitely this off season as well. And already like back to making some good progress in the gym and stuff like that too, because that's just the worst in prep. I think is probably one of the hardest things. And did you actually find that that was probably the most difficult part of the prep in itself, was like the training perspective, especially when you love training so much? Like that's often the hardest thing to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do all the cardio. I will eat no food. I do not care. But as soon as training started to feel like a chore, it really got mentally difficult. And then because I'd go in and say numbers would go down, and then you start off on this spiral of numbers have gone down, you've lost muscle, you are small, you look shit, you know, like, and that's kind of how it, like, I'm not even ashamed to say there's so many days like I would end up crying in the gym, not from like not even from like frustration or whatever, but just because I just felt so like tired, and I was like, oh, like this is just so annoying. So yeah, I definitely did like, and I did really, really well for quite a while, but like I was, you know, using my logbook, I was keeping the numbers there. But there came a point where I actually had to stop using my logbook because it was stressing me out,
Yeah.
seeing how much, like I remember like deadlifting, and like I love deadlifting, and I can deadlift. I was deadlifting like 150 kilos at the start of prep, and I remember just doing like 125, 130, and thinking, this is so depressing. And like, you know, in your head, you're so much lighter, you know, like there's so much less of you to move the weight. But when you're someone who loves training the way that we do, like you like being that kind of process data driven, I'm adding this amount per week, I'm adding these many reps, it does become a mind game. And one thing I really had to remind myself at the end of the prep was like, you're not going in here to like progressively overload massively, like you're going in to just stimulate your muscle. And if you can do that, even if the reps have to be like less reps or a lighter weight, like it doesn't matter. You know, I think you do just sort of have to like remind yourself of that. But it definitely is, that was the hardest part, like just absolutely the hardest part. And I knew it was going to happen as well, but it didn't make it any easier in the moment, you know, kind of walking into the gym and you're almost dreading it because you just know that like it's probably going to end in a bit of frustration, and then equally getting annoyed at yourself that you're letting that happen. It was like such a roundabout thing in your head. You're like, no, you're enjoying your training. But then sometimes I go to the gym and it was fun, especially, you know, because that's when I would be like looking at myself and seeing myself all shredded, and I was like, okay, this is why we're doing this. But yeah, I think that is easily like the hardest thing that I experienced.
Yeah, it can be so up and down, especially when you're actually starting that prep like so strong as well. Like that's what's so hard, like on movements like deadlifts that are so impacted by your body weight. Like when your body weight comes right down at the back end, like you said, you literally feel your hip bones protruding in the deadlift. Like it makes such a difference, and it's so hard. Like no matter how much you know, okay, like I'm maybe going to get leak, like it sucks big time, especially when training is like your everything and it's why you bodybuild in the first place. It's not fun, but I think that, like you say, you just start to get better at handling it. And I think that that's what you see a lot with like a lot of people that I've seen like prep over and over and over again, that they start to understand that more. So I don't think it ever gets easier. Like I don't think you can ever go into a session and be like, oh, dropped off 10 kilos on my deadlift, all good. I think that you just are able to rationalize it more rather than like being like in that state of frustration that I think the first time you go through it, it is just frustrating and it is annoying. Did it like improve a little bit for you at the end in terms of how you were mentally able to like rationalize it a little bit?
Yeah, I think by the end, so like because by the end I was actually traveling so much, like traveling to the UK and then to Budapest. Is that where the Euros was? I can't even remember
Yes.
this.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
Budapest.
Budapest.
And then obviously traveling to America, like you're going to all these different gyms and you have that novelty, and that makes the training then easier. But then when you kind of come back, because you haven't, say, done that session the previous week in your normal gym, you're not as tied to the numbers. And then by the end as well, a lot of my sessions were just like devolume, some like pump sessions. So that kind of helped a little bit. And I think when you know the end is in sight, I was thinking, okay, in like a few weeks, you're going to be eating a little bit more, like you probably will have more energy, and, you know, things are going to change. So just kind of just keep going, like just knuckle down and keep going. So yeah, like I think it definitely did like improve a little bit at the end. I remember there, like that day we were in the Dragon's Lair in Las Vegas, I was so jet lagged because I think my body thought it was midnight. And I was like, I'm gonna fall asleep doing these like lateral raises. Like that was probably one of the hardest sessions I've ever done. I felt like a dead woman walking. It was so funny. The jet lag ruined me going to America.
Yeah, to be fair, like you looked pretty tired in the session. I remember looking at you, I was like, Emma looks tired. I mean, even I was tired and I was like, you know, relatively heavy. So it's definitely not fun when you're lean either. And we'll definitely get into sort of what it was like traveling on prep as well, because that is a big one. But to actually bring it back to what that season was like for you then. So we've kind of gone through things in terms of like how the prep sort of was, and you were obviously pretty well prepared into it. Yes, there were challenges, but you were relatively well prepared. And then you come round to your first show, which has been a long time in the making. And the first one was WNBF Ireland, wasn't it?
Yeah.
what was that like for you at that point when you actually came around to that day, both like physically and mentally, and how you were feeling, and then just the kind of events that spiraled from there, really?
Yeah, so that show was, it was good because it was actually the WNBF Ireland's first year.
Oh
So
yeah,
they, yeah, so you know, they're a brand new federation. Like I think they definitely had maybe some like teething problems. Like there was no heating backstage, which was really, really hard because we were freezing. But no, like, and Lil and Finbar, who run the WNBF Ireland, are so, so nice, and they really, really care about like natural bodybuilding in Ireland, and they really did like look after us really well. But yeah, it was a really small show. I think like there was only 3 of us in the class. So I think initially I was almost like a little bit disappointed. But at the same time, like I had worked so hard for this. So I was just excited to kind of get up on stage. And I think there was just so many like amazing like firsts, you know, like you're like, oh my God, like getting my tan and, you know, doing my show day makeup and like all these like little things. And like I remember how like fun the first one was, like how like novel everything felt. And then by like show 3 you're like, oh, this whole thing again, I'm just going to do another show. But yeah, no, it was actually really a lot of fun. And it was nice because my family actually came to watch, which was really cool because I wasn't expecting them to come and watch any of my shows. So yeah, that was cool. And yeah, it was quite like a long day, I suppose, because we were on stage quite late. I want to say like 4 p.m. or something, which is funny. Looking back, most of my shows were like that. I was expecting like that they'd all be early. I didn't kind of realize how late most shows would be on, which that was definitely hard. So I think one of the hardest things I actually found about show day was like the waiting around. Because
Yeah.
you'd wake up and you might go and get your second coat tan and you do your makeup, and then you're just kind of sitting there, but you're also trying not to really like drink much water or eat much food, and not walk around and not like run around. I actually forgot some of my makeup at that show, so I was like running around the town, going to like the Tesco superstore to try and find makeup. Like no, it was a bit of a disaster. So I was like, I think I'd done like 10,000 steps before the
Great.
show.
Great for
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, I was like, oh wow, this is not going to plan. But yeah, I think like I was really nervous. Like I was just like, oh my God. I think in that moment you're thinking, I've put so much work into this, I put all this pressure on myself. Like my phone like did not stop like going off. Like so many people were messaging me, which was so nice. And I wasn't even expecting anybody to be like anybody to care about my show. And so I was thinking all these people are like watching, like oh my God, what if I lose? Like it's going to be so embarrassing. And yeah, then I just got on stage, and it was really nice actually because there was only 3 of us. Like they moved us around loads. They gave us loads of time on stage, so it wasn't like you came off knowing, you know, that you had won. Whereas like with some shows, if you've been in the center the whole time, you probably have a good idea that you've probably won. But with this one, like we were just being moved around so much, so I had no idea. And you don't know what you look like compared to other people like until you like watch back the footage. So I had no idea. I was like, I might look good, I might look terrible. But yeah, I ended up winning, which was really nice. I was like, okay. Honestly, I was just relieved. I was like, thank God that I won. It just kind of gave me a bit of a confidence boost. And then managed to come in and win the overall as well, which was amazing. So yeah, it was a really, really nice start to the season. Like it was a small show, but it was like everybody there was so nice. And then like even they were all at kind of WNBF Worlds then a few months later, and it was just nice to kind of have that like family atmosphere. But yeah, it was a nice show. I'm excited to actually go and watch it this year and like support them because they're really nice. Yeah, so is the NBFI. I'm always like conscious to say that because I don't want people to think that I like have chosen one federation over the other. The NBFI are also amazing. Just want to put that out there.
No, they were both really, really good shows. I think it was nice that you had that first one that was like quite small in a way. Because it made maybe that first experience like a little bit less intimidating. And like I think the girls that you were even with like in the figure class were like all really nice and stuff, and that makes a huge difference. And you also had Shane there as well at all of your shows, but especially at the first one too, which was that quite nice to like kind of have him there with you as well.
Yeah, I think it was actually like amazing getting to prep together. People always ask us about that because I think it can go either way if you're prepping like alongside your partner. But no, we got on really, really well the whole time. It was actually amazing to have somebody like, you know, we were accountable to each other. Like because we our days ran the same, like we'd do all the same steps, we'd go to the gym at the same time. So you know, if I didn't want to go out on a walk, well, he was going out on a walk. So I had to go with him, and just like little things like that. So yeah, that was nice. That was probably one of like the best things about just even like the season in general, and like getting to travel like all over the world competing like with my boyfriend. Like that was amazing. So yeah, that was nice. And yeah, I definitely felt like less pressure at that show. And also because when I won that, they then were like, okay, so you've been invited to Worlds. And that was a big sense of relief, because in my head, I always envisioned that season ending in America. Like I knew I wanted to compete into November. Like I just, which like even I didn't want to say it out loud to people, but in my head I was like, I want to get either to the Natural Olympia or to the Worlds. So when I won that and they were like, that's your invite to Worlds, I was just kind of like, okay, cool. This means I'm on prep for another 9 weeks, I want to say. And I was just really excited about that then, because really I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to do well at the NBFI. That was the one I wanted to win, because I wanted to go to the British finals. Like that was one of my main goals. And I knew I had to win that show to get the invite to the British. Like there was no question about it. So I actually felt way more pressure going into that second show, and way more self-doubt. And like even Shane was like, you just won that like the weekend before, why are you doubting yourself? And I was like, because I was like, what if I'm not good enough this weekend? Again, this just goes back to, but to be fair, there was a lot more girls in the NBFI show. It was a bigger show. But yeah, I definitely felt a lot more nerves going into that one, because the stakes were higher. Like I just, because I'd always followed like AJ and all his clients, like I knew I wanted to go to that British show, to the British Championship. So yeah, I was definitely more nervous going into that one, like way more. I was like in such a tizzy. I remember like the morning before the show, I was like, I look so bad. And Shane was like, what are you, like, pro tip for anybody who's competing, don't take check-in pictures inside when you've got your base layer of tan on. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good ever. So bad. So bad. There's nothing like taking those check-in pictures and being like, wow, I look really bad.
The best thing is like send the pictures before you get your tan to your coach. If you've got a plan, follow the plan, don't worry. And then if your coach is there, great, let your coach look at you in person, but don't try and take your own pictures, because you're gonna really upset yourself.
I always did it. Like I always just took check-in pictures in the morning of the show and sent them to AJ, and he never really said anything about it. He was like, yeah, cool, just do what we said. And I remember I was talking to Grace at the Euros, and she was like, you send check-in pictures on show day? And I was like, yeah, you don't? And she was like, no. I was like, okay, I didn't know that was an option. Yeah, it definitely, oh my god, yeah, because you just look so like flat and washed out. It's terrible. It's not a good look. Not a good look.
But you looked great on stage though, and that was all that really mattered. And you obviously took that NBFI title, which was obviously really cool, and that was basically back-to-back figure title and then overalls as well, which is pretty cool. And you got a mammoth trophy as well at the NBFI too, which was literally like the size of me.
Yeah, you can see it. Like,
there it is.
I made Shane, well, no, Shane was going home for something, and I was like, you better bring me back my trophy. Because he was tasked with bringing the trophies over to Canada, and then he forgot. So I was like, okay, you bring me back. And he took it out of the suitcase. He was like, this fucking thing, it's so heavy. I was like, yay. Yeah, no, I love it. It's like my pride and joy, that trophy. Nice. Yeah, that was such a shock. Like even I remember it, because I wasn't in the center in that show. So I honestly, when they called us all off, I was feeling so deflated, because in my head I was like, I obviously haven't won, and I was like almost like holding back tears, just because again it meant so much to me. So then when I won, I was thinking, what is going on? And then when I went into for the overall against Deanne, who's incredible, and like I've followed her for years. I had seen her, I remember in the gym like 5 years ago. And I thought she was amazing. And so when I knew I was going up against her, I was like, well, she's gonna win this, because like she's incredible. And so when they called my name, I have the video, and like I can hear Lee from the UKDFBA saying my name, and thinking, what is going on? It was a genuine, like, just such a shock to me, which I think made it feel even better, because when you come off thinking you haven't even placed, or that you've come maybe third, to then win, to then go on to get the overall, it's just it was such a whirlwind of emotions. Like, remember they were taking my urine test afterwards, and I couldn't even speak. They were like, are you okay? And I was like, no, not really. I don't know what's just happened.
Yeah, I remember being just like so happy for you in that moment, because I could see obviously how happy you were as well. And that's always something that I say over and over again, is just so nice to see on an athlete on stage, because you do often see it when people win and they just don't seem like it means very much. So it's really nice to see that you were just like, just so happy, and you definitely deserve that. And I think the fact that you won those 2 shows like at home, like it means everything to win those in like your home country. So that was really cool, and that obviously took you on to the following shows on from there, which were then kind of like that big sort of like almost step up, because you had UKDFBA finals, which is like an international show as well. So it is like the British finals, but it's kind of not, because there's also people from like Austria, Germany, Ireland, everywhere coming over. And then obviously the Europeans and kind of the world's natural, everything from there. So what was like your thought process then going into that next part of the season? And how did you kind of handle that next sort of stage of prep from there?
Yeah, so at that point, like having won those shows, I was like, okay, I'm just so happy already. And I just said, going into the next string of shows that were all international, like I know that the standard's going to be so high, and I'm just going to be proud of myself for having gotten there.
Yeah.
However, I am competitive. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, I was just hoping to go and do okay. Obviously, I wanted to go and I wanted to win because that's just who I am. Like, I'm not like, I think when you have one, then you have that confidence. Like, you can say that you have the goal. You know, I think if I had come like third in all those shows, it would be silly of me to go to the international show saying, oh, I'm going to win. Like, that's not going to happen. But I had that belief, and, you know, I had like people like in my corner and who said, you know, like, you have the potential to do really, really well. So it's not that I went into any of those shows expecting to win. I didn't, but I was going in to compete. You know, I was going in to represent my country and do the best that I could, you know. But I knew equally that like the standard was going to be really, really high, especially say like at the UKDFBA. Like, I knew I was going up against Grace, and Grace is an incredible athlete. So I kind of knew like she is probably going to beat me, but I didn't mind, because equally that weekend for me was really about being with like everybody, like being with you, being with AJ, being with all my teammates. Like, that's, and when I think about that weekend, that's what I remember. Like, yeah, the show itself was fun. It was great to be on stage. I had a lovely time, but I just remember everything around that. And that's actually what like meant the most to me about that weekend, was like meeting all these people who I had followed for years, who we had been talking for months and months, you know, about our preps. So to actually meet them all in person, like, that was incredible, you know, and that's what I kind of took away the most. And like, when I did come second, like, obviously I not just said like I wanted to win, but I didn't expect to win. I was so happy that I came second. Like, I was really, really proud of that. Because again, like, the standard of that show was really, really high. It is, I think, especially like in the figure class, yes, the standard was really high. I mean, in some of those male classes, like the standard at that show was probably the highest I saw across all of the other shows that I went to. The Europeans, the Worlds, the Natural Olympia, like the standard at that UK show was super high. So to come away with a second, like at the British finals in my first year of competing, I was like, I'm happy with that. I will take that. You know, I was really, really proud of that.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I think, like you say, that the day in itself and the experience was actually so amazing. And like, you can go to some of your shows and there will be some that are very, very much like outcome based. And even the ones where you get a great experience, you still want a great outcome. But if you can get more out of it as well, like, that's just an added win. And I think to see you at that show with like Meg and like everyone else, and it was just so nice to see that all come together, because there is just such an amazing community available, and you just get such an amazing experience. And I think that show in itself, I mean, it's always run so well by the UKDFBA. But yes, I saw you kind of come away with that really awesome experience there, and it was really nice. It was very cool to see also like the 3 of you all like in the top 3 was really awesome. But yeah, it's nice to hear that you kind of came away with that with like a little bit. Obviously you wanted to win always, but still a positive experience, which I think, do you feel like that led you in quite positively to the next show, which was then the Euros from there? So like we mentioned earlier, we went to Budapest. That was for the INBA, PNBA. So they're affiliated with both the NBFI and the UKDFBA, and went to the Worlds from there. So how was that? Because that was now then, you traveled to the UK, but it's not quite as far. What was that then like, traveling over to Budapest and then going to what is really like quite a major competition?
Yeah, it was an experience. It got really, really fun then. Again, so after getting off stage at the British, like the first thing I did was I messaged AJ the next day and I was like, what do I need to do to be better? Like, because that's just what I'm like, I was just kind of like, okay, I'm really happy with this, but I never like celebrated after any of my shows. I was always just like, what's next? How can I improve? So going into the Euros, like we dug a little bit harder. He was like, I think we can push more and I think we can probably kind of come in a little bit fuller too. So I was like, Grant, let's do that. Like I was like, I will do anything. Like take all my food, give me all the cardio. I don't care. And yeah, I was like just excited to travel. I think traveling to Budapest was fine. The only thing about Budapest was that the flight was really late. So the flight was at like 8 p.m. Irish time and it got in really, really late. So we ended up staying at like a little hotel right beside the airport, just because it's actually quite far from the airport to where our Airbnb was. And also like we would have to pay for an entire extra day on the Airbnb. And I was like, I'm not doing that. So we stayed in this like little hotel. And then the next morning we got to the Airbnb and then I was like, I'm going to go and check in with AJ. So we ended up like traipsing around Budapest for ages because I couldn't find your Airbnb. Yeah. I was wrecked and I was starving and Shane was starving and Shane was like, why did you do this? And I was like, I'm sorry. He was like, I just wanted to eat my breakfast. But yeah, so and I remember that after that AJ was like, okay, can you just go sit down, do not move for the rest of the day? And I was like, I can try. But yeah, I think like traveling, it's definitely a new challenge. But I think at that point in prep, you're so used to like, these are all the meals I eat. This is what I do. So when it comes to like getting all that stuff ready, like it was really easy for me to just like prep my meals. I knew what to bring with me. The only thing about traveling internationally is you can't bring like your air fryer, which was one of our main things we brought to all our shows. So I think it was more so just about like trying not to stress, which is much easier said than done. And kind of giving ourselves enough time. So like I think the show was on Saturday, so like we went on Wednesday night just because I knew like I wanted to give my body kind of time. But yeah, it was just exciting really. I think it is funny though, whenever people ask me about the traveling, especially to like Budapest, they're like, oh, what was the city like and stuff, and I'm saying I have no idea. I didn't see any of it because you go and you're just sitting there because you have to like rest, you can't be running around. And then like we left like the morning after the show, like on the Sunday morning. So I didn't see like any of Budapest. It was literally just get the plane there, get to the Airbnb, relax, go to the show, come home, and then fly home. So it's fun. But yeah, I think like, especially if it's like a show in the middle of your season, it's not like you're going to see a whole lot of the city. Especially again, like I said, I didn't really like go out and eat or anything after any of my shows. It was just like, go home and have some cream of rice.
Yeah, exactly. I think unless you're like staying after a show, like you guys obviously did in LA at the end, you're just not going to see like anything, unfortunately. But the experience in itself was obviously a fantastic show for you. I think one that was actually like, from what I saw from my perspective, like quite a shock in terms of
a shock. Yeah,
what you got there. So do you want to talk through what that was actually like for you?
Yeah, so I just was going into that show, just wanted. I said to myself, I'd love to get like top 3 or 4, like that would be really nice. But I had zero expectations. Like this is all of Europe. I have no idea who's showing up. There was one girl who I knew was competing. I don't know if you remember her. Her name's like Rachel. She's the girl who came second.
Yes.
So I had seen her on Instagram. She won the WNBF UK, won the WNBF Switzerland, won she was a DFAC pro, like she had won everything. And she is lovely, by the way. I was talking to her so much at the Natural Olympia and WNBF Worlds. She is a sweetheart. I knew she was competing. So I was just in my head, she's going to win because she's won everything. So she's going to win. So I honestly just going into that show thinking, I'm here to just do myself proud. I knew I had pushed the hardest I'd pushed. I looked the best I looked. For me, that was all I wanted. Like I knew that was all I could do was, bring my best. And I was just trying to relax. And like the day itself was super long. Again, I think we were on stage at like 7 p.m. in the end, which is again, it's difficult like holding your look all day. So I was just, by the time we came to stage, I was just ready to get off stage because I was so tired. And yeah, we were just up there and it was mad because we were up on stage for like 15-20 minutes. Like they were doing so many call outs, and like the way with the INBA at the Euros was they would do like a call out for each specific judge. So each specific judge would choose the people they wanted to see, and they just kept calling me out, and I could see them looking at me, like I could see them kind of pointing at me and stuff like that. But equally at the same time, I almost didn't want to believe they are looking at me, because I was thinking, they're probably looking at the girl beside me because that's Rachel and she looks better than me, kind of thing. And yeah, when then they were kind of doing the placings, and they called out, I think it was the top 6 went out, and then they did the placing, and then we did like our eye walk, and then they did the placings. So yeah, as they were just like calling like 6th and 5th and 4th and 3rd, and then there was Rachel and I standing there, and they called 2nd, and I think she's from Switzerland, and they're like, oh, Switzerland, and she was 2nd, and I was sitting there thinking, hang on, what? And yeah, I was just crying. Like I started crying straight away, because I just couldn't believe it. Like I was almost thinking, have they got this wrong? Did they just get the wrong number? Because I don't think they meant to give it to me. And I didn't even think about the pro card or anything like that. And then they brought that over to me, and there was just so much motion. I walked off stage and I was bawling, crying. I just could not believe what had happened, because I genuinely had zero confidence. Not zero confidence, like not that I didn't think I was good enough, but I just had no expectations, because I just thought like this is such a big show, and who knows how many people are going to be there, who knows who's going to show up, so yeah, it was the biggest shock ever. I think that was probably one of my favorite days. And again, like there were so many people there, like you guys were all there. The great thing about like everybody from the UK, the FBA, were like super supportive, like for me even, which like was really, really nice. And then there was some of my Irish teammates there as well. Leanne was competing that day. So it was just, it was crazy. I just couldn't believe it. I think like actually Team Ireland ended up having like 3. There was me, one of the bodybuilders, he won, and then Leanne won. It was crazy. Like I was like, yes, go us, our little tiny nation. I don't think people think of bodybuilding when they think Ireland, but proving them wrong. So yeah, it was amazing. I was just on such a high after that. I couldn't believe it. I kept looking at the trophy and being like, what is going on?
It was really awesome. And like you say, it was really hard to see what the judges were doing. So obviously you can look at a lineup and think, oh, I think this is where they're going to go. But it ultimately depends what the judges think. And they were making so many call outs that I was like, what is going on? And you just don't know. But one thing that you did do, like you say, you weren't like super confident, but you always displayed yourself as being very confident on stage. And I think that's always so important, is like, no matter whether you think that they're placing you last or they're placing you first, like look confident on stage and present yourself as best as possible, because even if they're going to place you last, like make sure that you've at least done your absolute best to present yourself in the best way you have done, because ultimately you've worked so hard to get to that point. Like you don't want to let yourself down on show day by not having fun and like just showing yourself in the best way possible. And you, no matter what, always did such a great job with that across the season. Always noticed that.
Yeah, I definitely, like, posing does not come naturally to me. I started posing like 2 years before I even started prep. Like pretty much a few months after I started with AJ, I got posing lessons, because I knew like this is going to be difficult for me, because I'm not a dancer or a gymnast or any of those things. Like I am awkward. I don't know, like walking in heels is just so foreign to me. So that was something I really, really worked on. And like I almost, not in like a weird way, but have like a persona, like it's almost like a different version of me on stage, because that's just so much easier for me. And yeah, I definitely think that too. I think the way you pose will draw the judges' eyes towards you. And it was even things I noticed like at other shows, say if I was like standing at the side, I would always stay like completely switched on and smiling and staring at the judges. And like I would see them when they're judging the lineup, like, or they're judging the call out, they would be looking at me at the side, and like just little things like that. I think people think that, oh, they're only really looking at you when you're in the call outs, but that's not the case at all. And like you do not want to just like stop and relax. Like you want to be on the entire time. It's such a workout in and of itself. Like posing is so hard. Like whenever somebody asks me about competing, I say just if you think you want to do it, just start posing now, because it can, like I think that as well, especially with the Euros. I think like a big part of it was stage presence, because I was a lot smaller than Rachel. Like she's definitely like bigger than I am, and like she was leaner than I was. But I think maybe it was just the way I was posing, like they liked it for whatever reason. So yeah, it's definitely a big contributing factor.
Yeah,
Especially
massively in figure, massively. Like you just presented yourself so well, and it's from the physique, but to also like the facial expressions and everything, just like looking happy. Like people will draw their eyes to you if you look like you don't want to be on stage. Like a judge probably won't notice you because they'll just instantly think like they don't look like they want to be there. If you look happy and you look like you want to be there, like it does make a huge difference. But yeah, you did an awesome job there, and like you said, you were kind of almost like so taken aback by everything that you didn't even notice the pro card as well, which I think it almost says a lot to the fact that, and this is something that I and AJ as well, like we talk about this a lot in the sense that, you know, the title often means more than the pro card. And in natural bodybuilding especially, it's a big thing that I think a lot of us think more about is like one, because there's so many amazing titles that you can like win and everything on that front. But you did obviously get the pro card at that show, but then moving on to the Natural Olympia chose not to move forwards with that or to compete as a pro. What was like the decision for you, like all the thought process overall really in terms of, you know, when you first got it and what you decided to do moving forwards from there? Because for anyone who doesn't know, if you do receive a pro card, you don't have to take that pro card if you don't believe that you want to move forwards with it.
Yeah, so I won when I won it. I remember the first thing I said to AJ was like, "Guess we're going to the Pro Natural Olympia," and he was like, "Yeah, of course," because I was just on such a high. And then the next day, I sort of messaged him, and I was like, "Okay, like, what do you think? You know, what should I do?" And he kind of gave me his thoughts, which he said, you know, you could take it, and you know, you would probably do well, like in the pro lineup, of course. Like, are most of the pro figure girls a lot older than you? Yes, you know, that is the case. They are older, they will be bigger. And I kind of knew that. And he was like, but ultimately it comes down to what do you actually want out of natural bodybuilding? Like, do you want to be an INBA, PNBA pro? Like, you know, if you take that pro card, you know, if you were to compete again in the natural federations, you know, you can't do the NBFI show, you can't do the UKDFBA show unless they have a figure class for the pros, which they probably won't for a long time. And, you know, and that was such a good point. And I suppose pretty much straight away I said, yeah, do you know what? I don't really want, not that I don't want the pro card. That sounds very like, ugh, I don't care about the pro card. But my goal was never, like going into last season, my goal was never to become a pro. Like, obviously, I knew that it was a possibility. I knew if I did well, maybe I would win a pro card, but it wasn't like I'm going in road to pro, I want that pro card. And I was still very much testing the waters of natural bodybuilding, like even getting to know all these different federations. You know, there's so many on offer. And I suppose I just didn't want to kind of close myself off or like completely commit to one federation when I still had other federations to, I suppose, experience and go to their shows. Like, obviously I knew I was going to WNBF Worlds. And yeah, I just kind of ultimately decided, like, I'm still young. I knew going, if I went up against those pro figure girls, like I looked at the pro figure lineup from the INBA, like those women are wham. They are so much more mature and dense than me. I just thought, like, what's the point? You know, I don't want to go up there and look like a child on stage, you know. But I think, yeah, ultimately it just came down to my goal was never to become a pro last year. I just wanted to experience and see what I looked like on stage. So I was happy to stay as an amateur and just finish my season as I had planned. And the way I kind of framed it was, if I decide after this season I want to go and be an INBA, PNBA figure pro, and if I'm worthy of it, I'll win it again. You know, exactly. if I'm supposed to be, if I'm good enough to be that, like, I won't have a problem winning it again. So that was kind of my my thought process behind that.
Yeah, so a really, really good way of phrasing it as well, because I think a lot of people view it as like almost like, I need to somehow get this pro card. It's like, what's the point of getting the pro card? The point of getting the pro card is so that you can enjoy being a pro and be a competitive pro. It's not so that you can just get this thing and then, like, what do you do with your career from there? Like, viewing it from such a wider perspective is definitely so important. So I think a lot of people will find that quite insightful as well. I always think it's something that's quite good with natural feds in that we're quite different to the IFBB, whereas like there's a very clear cut route of like a lot of people wanting to turn pro and then move from there. Whereas we actually have like almost more opportunities as amateurs at the moment, which is quite like, I quite like it because I think it makes it more inviting for a lot of people. And it's nice that it just presents like more opportunities and also more like longevity as well as an amateur to like move on in your career too.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a lot on offer. But yeah, and especially like within Europe, like as an INBA figure pro, you'd be looking at a show a year maybe. And so yeah, I just didn't want to close off my options, really was kind of the main thing. And I think it was really like nice of AJ to kind of frame it like that for me. And he definitely helped a lot with that decision, because yeah, I potentially would have just been like, woohoo, let's go do the pro show at the Olympia, and potentially ended up just kind of being like, why did I make this decision? So yeah, it was good. I think that's why you need to have like a good coach in your corner who like can think long term for you, you know?
Yeah, it makes a massive difference. Did you feel like that was the right decision for you as well by the time you came round to doing the Natural Olympia?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like when I did see, even in person, the pro figure lineup, I was like, yeah, I made the right decision here.
Yeah, it was a massive lineup at that show. There was absolutely crazy. What was that show like for you at that point? Because I know you'd obviously gone from like a really big high from being at the Euros and then going to the Natural O, and like maybe not getting like, it was a very, very different show, to be honest, as well, compared to everything else. And I think one thing to really put into perspective with these shows as well is that they're very different in terms of like the setup of the shows and where they are. The judges from like nation to nation like varies massively, which especially in a class like figure as well makes a huge difference. But often in the moment as well, like that's always very hard to like put into perspective. How was that experience for you, like after basically having like 4 shows where you've just been like on the trot, like good to go for your season? Do you want to talk through what that day was like and how that was for you?
Yeah, so for context, I didn't place at the Natural Olympia. I think I might have come 4th or 5th, but I don't know. It killed me. It was really, really tough, and not like I almost like it's hard, not hard to talk about, but like it's hard to talk about without sounding like cocky. But I went into that show, I felt the best I'd ever felt. I pushed so hard going into the Natural Olympia. I was the leanest I'd been. I think our peak had gone really, really well. It was the first time I'd woken up on a show day actually liking what I looked like and being really, really proud of it. And it just was over so quickly. Like I felt like I didn't even really get judged. It was almost like we went up on stage, we did 2 rounds of posing, and that was it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I came off and I was just thinking, wow, like they haven't even looked at me, not even ashamed to admit, like straight away I was like bawling, crying, because I mean, you go from winning 2 weeks before, and then suddenly you're not even getting looked at in a very similar lineup, which I think is kind of what was difficult as well. Not difficult because again, I know that like people, like different judges will prefer a different look, and I think that day they favored the more kind of mature, like almost like masters figure look within our class, which is absolutely fine. And like the girls who beat me were incredible, the women who beat me were incredible, so it's not that I thought I was better than them, but it was just I was confused because how did I win? And then in that moment I almost felt like the win the few weeks before didn't count. It almost felt like that was a mistake. They obviously didn't mean to award me that because I came here and they didn't even look at me. So it was really, really difficult. But I'm really glad it happened, because you have to lose. You have to learn how to lose. And I think it really taught me to put more stock in how I felt about the package I brought on the day. Like, don't get me wrong, there was things I definitely could have done better. Like I kind of messed up a little bit with like the glaze. I got it done way too early. Even with the pump up, like I pumped up and then they held beside the stage for like 20 minutes. It was really frustrating. So like definitely and the lighting was not great. I'm not even gonna pretend about it. Like it was like it was like a bright lit room. It was so strange. So like I don't think that did me any favors. Like even when I saw the pictures from afterwards, like I was like, what happened to my legs and like everything? So I think like there was just a lot of things that transpired in me not looking my best, and that is fine. That is bodybuilding, and I actually think like you have to understand that like these things are going to happen. Like you could be the proudest you've been of a package and you might lose, and yeah, I think like learning to lose, it's a good lesson, because I know a lot of people who've won every single show they've done, and I don't envy them, because one day, like, you know, say even if you're someone competing in the NPC, IFBB, you're not going to win your first Olympia. Like, that's not going to happen. You're probably not going to win your first pro show. So like, learning how to accept defeat, as much as it sucks in the moment, you do have to then just kind of be able to bounce back from that and remind yourself that like, it's a subjective sport, and as long as you know you've done your best, you know, as long as you can say, I did everything I needed to do, that's all that matters. Did I wish it had gone differently? Yeah, of course, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about it. It's bodybuilding. It's a subjective sport, and you're being judged by strangers. Like, that's just kind of how it goes. So yeah, it was hard, and like, I think sometimes people are afraid to admit when a loss like hurts that much, but like, it hurt, because I just, not that I expected to win, like, I think that would be kind of cocky to say, but like, when you're going up against a lot of the same people that you've gone up against in previous weeks, and then to like not even feel like they've really looked at you much, I was a bit like, oh, okay, but it is what it is. And again, I think like, it's something that I'm glad I experienced, because it's a lesson I'll definitely take with me into the future.
Yeah, I think it's because, like you say, it's not cocky, because it's a case of knowing you are genuinely capable of winning in a lineup like that. And that's the difference. But like you've just said and put into perspective so well there, you learn, and you just begin to realize that you can do everything within your control. And there's going to be some things out of your control that you can't do anything about. And that's just, unfortunately, the game that it is. But the more that you learn that, the more resilient you are going into future things. It sounds cringy, but it does only make you stronger going into those next things. And I know it was maybe a little bit hard for you going into the WNBF Worlds, moving on from there, because you still had one show, and it sucks big time when you have those highs and then those lows. But I know for sure coming out that you were so grateful that you did kind of stick with and go through to that experience, because I believe that was a much, much more like positive experience for you on that weekend.
Yeah, so coming off the back of the Natural Olympia, first of all, my confidence was really, really knocked. You know, I was thinking, oh, like all the, you know, suddenly all the wins stopped mattering. And all I could think was, I'm just not good at this, which is so silly, but in the moment, that's just how your brain goes. And then I'm pretty sure I got COVID. So everybody got sick after the Natural Olympia, and I was so ill. I remember we flew from Vegas to LA on the Tuesday, and I was so sick. I felt horrendous, like really bad headaches, like fever, chills, everything. And every single day I was waking up thinking, is this the day I'm going to have to pull out? Because like, I just felt really, really bad. Like, and the worst thing is when you're that sick and you're that close to show, you can't take any painkillers, because you're just terrified that they're going to cause water retention, or, you know what I mean? Like, so you're trying really, really hard to just like push through. I remember I was in an Albertsons, one of the grocery stores, in the evening time. I think it was like the Wednesday, and the rest of Team Ireland were there, and they were like, I could actually just see on their face the concern, because I was just standing there like a shell, like my eye, like bloodshot eyes, and like they wouldn't even come near me. They were like, are you okay? And I was just like, no, I'm really not. Then they saw me again like 3 days later, and they're like, you look a lot better. And I was like, okay, I must be getting better. So yeah, that week was such a mental battle that week. Like, every day, like I said, I thought I was going to have to pull out. I was so burnt out. I mean, this was my 31st week of prepping, and at that point I was like, I am so bored of weighing all my food, taking these check-in pictures every day. Like, I was just a little bit, I think, like, fed up. But equally, I knew like, this is the last week. You just have to keep going for this one more week. And, you know, you're in LA. Like, you know, I was trying to really like zoom out and bring perspective to it, and say to yourself, like, this is your first season competing. You're in LA, you know, the sun is shining. It doesn't matter how you do at the weekend. Like, you're going to look fine, but this is about the experience. But I was not enjoying the experience because of how crappy I felt, and then getting annoyed at myself that I wasn't enjoying the experience. So it was like that week was easily just such an emotional turmoil. Like, every day it was just like, okay, just get to the end of today, and then you can relax. So I definitely think, like, coming into that show, like, even that day, it was such a long day. Again, I think I was on stage, it wasn't too bad. I think it was like 6 p.m. So nothing compared to previous WNBF World years. I wasn't on stage at 1 a.m. or anything like that, but it was a long day. I think even like looking back at the pictures, like I looked good. I was happy with it, but I think you could see in my physique, like I was tired, you know, like my body just looked really, really wrecked. So the fact that I still came away with a third, like I was honestly delighted with that. Like I was so relieved, because like it could have gone a lot worse, or I could have not gotten on stage. But I said to myself, like, you've made it this far, like 3-4 more days, like just keep going.
And you knew it was the end as well. And Shane was sat next to me with some Randy's donuts, so that was probably getting you through.
It really was. Do you know what? It was so funny. So like, because with the WNBF Worlds, again, it was like if you came top 6, you got called back on to do your IWalk. But in the meantime, they did the judging of the next class. So we had to wait like 20 minutes, and they came up and they called my number and they're like, okay, you're in the top 6. And I just being really annoyed because all I wanted to do was go and eat. Like I was like, that's how grown I was. And like, because I hadn't had any food like after any shows, and like I knew that box of donuts was there, and I was ready by that point. So yeah, but obviously I was also like really, really honored and like delighted that I did get third, because again, going into that show, I just had no idea. And to be fair, the girl who won the class she had just won the Masters figure that morning, the pro show. Yeah. She was incredible. I remember when I saw her warming up or pumping up, I was thinking, oh, yes, okay, this is who we're up against. There was a few pros actually in that class, I think. So like even knowing that I actually did place higher than them, like that to me is crazy. Because like the standard in that class was great, and that show was really nice. And again, like that show, like we were up on stage for ages at that show. I was so tired by the time we came off stage. Like my back was almost breaking from like arching over in the back shot. It was but it was nice. It was a nice way to end the season. I think after such a tough week, I think I'm really glad I saw it through, because if I had ended the season at the Natural Olympia, I would have been left a bit disappointed just with kind of not placing after placing at all the other shows. So to come away with third in the world, I was like, I'll take that. I'm happy. You know, it's been a good weekend.
Yeah, it was really good. It was a really nice show, and I think being in like LA as well was a nice place to finish the season. There's definitely like worse places that you could do a bodybuilding show. Definitely a bit nicer than Vegas as well. So
it was gorgeous. Like it was so nice. I remember it was like November and we were all there in like shorts and t-shirts. Like it was like summer. It was amazing. Like that was probably like one of even the best bits about the entire season, was like having those few days after the show with Shane, because he did WNBF Worlds. Like we had worked, like I dieted for 31 weeks and I think he did 40. Like he was on prep longer than I was. So, you know, we both really, really earned that. And it was just so nice to just relax. Like I just remember the next day waking up and not taking check-in pictures. That was probably because poor AJ, like his phone is probably just like way too full of pictures of me. Like I think we did daily check-ins for 9 weeks. So I'd say he was so sick of me by the end. And I was definitely happy that I wasn't having to like go outside. Like I remember even like at the hotel in LA trying to find somewhere to take my check-in pictures in the morning, because like, you know yourself, if the lighting is bad, like that will just ruin your day. So I just remember I got really, really good at finding like inconspicuous outdoor spots to take check-in pictures. Someone would be walking by like, why is there a girl there half naked, like with a tripod? So yeah, it was nice. It was a nice mental relief, I think, finishing. But
yeah, big time. And like that first morning that you wake up and you don't have to take pictures of yourself is just wonderful.
I remember I was like making a bagel and like putting peanut butter on it, and I wasn't weighing it, and I was like, wow, this feels weird. Or we went to Starbucks and I got I get like a Starbucks with like, you know, like milky coffee, and I was like, oh my god, it's just the little things, like you appreciate them so much after prep. But yeah, it was a fantastic way to really like wrap up the season. And I think again, it really like put it into perspective. Like that was my first season competing, and I got to finish it doing the Worlds and like traveling to LA and traveling to Vegas. Like it was an incredible experience, even if in the moment like there was challenges and it was hard. But equally, I came off that stage at the WNBF Worlds thinking, okay, if I can do this, I can do anything. Like I really can. Like I can push through anything. I think that's what like the biggest lesson of the whole season was, is just like being resilient, like, and just having that ability to keep going even when even when you don't want to, even when you don't think there's any point because you just assume you're going to lose or you're going to look bad, you still show up. And yeah, that was kind of the biggest thing I think for me.
Yeah, I think that the season as a whole, with like all the highs and all the lows, just like actually allowed you to come out of that first season just with so much experience, so much that you could take away from it, which I think is awesome. It's why we've got to like kind of experience those different things and also enable ourselves to like learn and take as much as we can out of them at the time, which is immense. So like, thank you so much for kind of sharing us through that whole prep, because it was really, really cool to hear through it. And we kind of touched a little bit on how you like have handled kind of coming into this off season a little bit, and where are you kind of like feeling at the moment now that you've sort of had like a good amount of like downtime, like following that prep? I know you've had a crazy amount of time with moving over to Canada now as well. But how has that all been with where you're at now really, and how you're just feeling about your goals with stuff moving forwards?
Yeah, so I think like coming like into off season or like even post show, it was definitely it was a bit hard just because it was like a month before Christmas. So like the actual, I think one thing for me is I was almost expecting to like step off stage, eat a donut and feel like I just had like crack cocaine hooked into my veins. And I never really got that. Like I enjoyed the food, but I never felt like out of control around food at all. Like obviously we had a few days in LA and look, we ate a lot. Like not even going to pretend like we didn't, because we were in LA and you know the American food is crazy. But even by the end of the trip, I was so ready to go home and eat my normal food and eat my normal meals and just get back into living like my life how I like to live it. But yeah, I think I even like coming to Christmas was a little bit difficult. It was a bit touch and go. There were some days where like, I mean, I was just eating so much Lindor. And then yes, moving to Canada, like I always had like so many things on the horizon. So now that I'm kind of like settled and everything like that, I do know like I will be competing again in 2025, 100%. I do want like time off. Like people were asking me what I'm going to compete this year, and I was like, no, like I need time. You know, I think like I'm only just coming to the point that I'm actually like recovering. It takes a long time to recover from a prep. Like if I was to start prep again in 2 months, like I wouldn't have built any muscle. Like I would look the exact same. So I want like at least this year, and then next year I actually have a few girls that are probably going to be competing. So my
Amazing.
first time taking people through a bodybuilding prep, I don't want to be on prep myself because I'll be like the brain fog is real. I think everybody who's done a prep, like probably not, especially the first time, like it is difficult like cognitively. And so I will be competing in 2025. However, I don't actually know right now what that's going to look like in terms of like what class I'm going to do, what federations I'm going to do. I have a lot of like things to decide over the next little while. Obviously, I mean, look, I'm saying this and it sounds really vague. I'm trying to decide if I want to stay natural or go assisted. I don't think there's any point in me like pretending that that's not the case and like skirting around the topic. I think this is the first time I've said it like openly that like that is something I'm taking or that I'm thinking about. But I want to take my time making the decision because it's a big decision. Like, and you know, I want to know everything and get all the information before, you know, leaping into something like that. I think it's easy post show to want to be like, oh, that was so hard. I just want to take assistance and make it easier. Like, and that's definitely not the case at all. But yeah, I'm just kind of taking my time with that decision. But mostly just kind of getting back into like training, enjoying my training. And yeah, like I'm training, like Law said, I'm in Canada. So I train in Pure Muscle and Fitness, which is one of the best gyms like ever, like in the world. It's crazy. And I'm just excited to like see how like massive I can get here, whether that's naturally or assisted. I don't care. Either way, I know I'm gonna get
It'll happen
food.
either way.
Yeah, you know. So I'm just kind of like I'm trying to like enjoy it without having that pressure on. I think like even like I was speaking to AJ about it a while ago, I was almost feeling like, oh, I've got so long before I prep again. It almost is hard, like it's easy to get complacent, I think. And he sort of framed it to me as like, I get what you're saying, but like think about it this way. You've got, say, gaining phase, you'll do a diet, you'll do another gaining phase, and then you'll be into your pre-prep diet, and then, you know, so like it's actually not that long when you think about it. And realistically, like this is sort of the same time period as when I started working towards 2022. So I know it's going to go quick. I mean, like I can't believe it's April tomorrow. Like the time is going quick. Like I'm almost 6 months post show, which I think at this point I can stop saying I'm almost X time post show. I'm actually just in off season. So yeah, it's definitely it's a period of us like trying to figure things out. But I think the thing with bodybuilding is I appreciate it takes time. So I don't feel like massively under pressure to make a decision right now, like I know that I can take my time with that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of putting it. Like, I think you've done you've explained it in a really good way, because I think every bodybuilder has like that decision that comes into mind. Like, anyone who says they've not thought about it is just lying. And I think that sometimes, like, taking that time, especially if you're thinking about it like post show, to just like allow yourself to come out and then like get clued up and start to make decisions and see how you feel, is just a much better place to be in. And like you said, there's like no pressure with anything, but you can just take your time and see how you get on. But no matter what, that you have a great amount of experience behind you, an amazing amount of support, and you've been in the game long enough to make smart decisions and make the right decision for you, which I think is fantastic, and a great thing for anyone to take away from this as well, who, you know, is having the same thoughts or thinking about what they want to do with their journey as well, which is awesome. But we've been talking for a relatively long amount of time now, but it's been an amazing chat. So thank you so much for joining us today, Emma. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Oh, it's been so nice to come on and talk about it. And yeah, it's, again, like I even said at the start, sometimes I just forget about these things. Like I forget that season even happened. So sometimes it's nice to remind myself that I have achieved some things.
Yeah, you absolutely have. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on again. Anyone who wants to find Emma, you can find her on Instagram at emma.currivan. You can find everything relating to obviously her own process and her coaching as well. So definitely make sure to have a look at that. So yeah, thank you so much, Emma, for joining us. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, if you can like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, if you can rate and follow the podcast, that would be amazing as well. And we'll be back again with another episode next week.